It is day 7 of the George Floyd murder trial in Minneapolis, and former police officer Derek Chauvin, who was accused of killing George Floyd, is on trial. The trial has become a landmark moment for national reckoning, with the proceedings being broadcast live every single day in America. The key witness testimonies and cross-examinations continue in the trial. The first one to testify today was Minneapolis Police Department Sergeant Young. Young is the Crisis Intervention Training Coordinator for the training unit. He has been with the department for about 24 years. Young has been responsible for training officers in crisis situations, and the police crisis trainer said that, quote unquote, if somebody is in need of medical attention, then we give medical attention. The second to testify was Minneapolis Police Lieutenant Johnny Mercer. He serves as a use of force instructor with the department's training unit. The police use of force instructor explained the training he gave Chauvin in 2018. Mercer even went ahead to say that Chauvin's knee on Floyd's neck would not be an authorized use of force. A damning statement for the former Minneapolis officer. And now let's cut across live to the proceedings.
No, sir, I got hired from the Minneapolis Police
down
Department
for 10 minutes.
I'm not sure if I would have held somebody down for 10 minutes or not. I don't have a recollection of that, sir.
Is it possible?
Yes, it's possible.
And there are circumstances, again, that an officer has to take into consideration in terms of continuing to use their body weight, regardless of whether the person is resisting or not resisting, right?
Rephrase that?
Sure. Sometimes an officer has called for EMS, correct?
That's correct.
And sometimes an officer may hold a person using their body weight to restrain them, awaiting the arrival of EMS, correct?
Yes, sir.
You've done that yourself?
I have.
And sometimes you've had to, or was it fair to say that you've had to train officers to use their body weight to continue holding them until EMS arrives?
As long as needed to control them, yes.
You would agree that a scene where force has been used and a crowd congregates and is voicing their displeasure or their concern or whatever you want to say, that can be a chaotic situation for an officer, right?
Yes, sir.
And you would agree also that what you train Minneapolis police officers to do, relevant to their use of force, is to consider the totality of the circumstances. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
And you train officers that the decision to use force is from their perspective.
Yes, sir.
Not the perspective, hindsight being 20/20.
That's correct.
That's the specific policy of Minneapolis Police Department.
I believe that's Graham versus Connor, sir.
That is encapsulated or incorporated into the Minneapolis Police Department policy on the use of force, correct?
Correct.
Because situations are rapidly evolving, correct?
That's correct.
And sometimes just because an incident is 10 minutes long or 20 minutes long, that doesn't mean that it can't instantaneously change.
That's correct.
Right? What may not be a threat 1 second can be a threat the next.
Correct.
Let's quickly get in a sense of perspective with regards to the testimonies that are happening in the trial. For more on that, I'm joined in by our correspondent Susan Tehrani, who's joining us live from the United States. Susan, what is the latest on day 7 of the Chauvin trial? We've just been watching a whole host of testimonies.
Yeah, we did hear really how the focus has been on this crisis intervention trainer that has been on the witness seat and the use of force trainer. And this is for prosecutors to really put focus on how police training at the Minneapolis Police Department is conducted and whether or not Derek Chauvin was in line with those practices or not. But earlier in the day, I think it's very important to note that before the jury came in, there was discussion, as has been earlier in the week, of whether or not Morris Hall, a friend of George Floyd, who has tried to avoid sitting in the witness seat, and he's tried to exercise his Fifth Amendment right in avoiding to testify, whether or not he will be forced by the judge to actually sit and testify, because there isn't a blanket law, at least not in Minneapolis, where someone in such a sensitive case can exercise his Fifth Amendment in all possible cases and avoid being a witness in such a trial. So the judge said that while Morris Hall does have some rights, he will decide next week whether or not he will have to come and be forced to testify on a narrow set of issues. The defense wants Morris Hall to come and testify for 3 reasons: because he was with George Floyd, he has previous arrests, and he fled Minneapolis. He's also in jail for a separate charge as well. Prosecutors don't want him. So that's sort of a backgrounder of where we are right now.
Right. Susan, the first week of the Chauvin trial was filled with emotions. How can this next part be characterized, and how is it crucial for the jury now?
So it was very emotional, as you mentioned, the first week, and now these prosecutors really have to move fast to prove that Chauvin violated police department policies by putting his knee allegedly for 9 minutes on George Floyd's neck. And they need to prove that it was Chauvin's knee that caused the death of George Floyd and not a drug overdose. And while those emotional testimonies did lead up to a sense of what happened, now it's this second stage perhaps is more important, because it's more the focus is more on the law, the police practices, the standards, and the jury will ultimately want to see substantive arguments on whether or not Derek Chauvin did anything wrong, or whether or not he was solely responsible for the death of George Floyd. Mind you, he is not charged with first-degree murder. He's charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter. So those are the issues that the jury will be looking for. And also, it's going to be very focused on expert testimony. So perhaps a lot more serious than what we saw during the first week.
Right, absolutely. Expert testimony being the key word over there. Thank you so much, Susan Tehrani, for bringing in those inputs. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.